بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله تعالى وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد ختم الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلينا معهم وفيهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وقد نوينا التعلم وتعليم وتذكر وتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة نبيه والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على خير وكل ما نواه مشايخنا ابتغاء وجه الله وثوابه وقربه. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم. Alhamdulillah, in our introduction to morphology lessons, today we will be talking about the al-amr wal-nahi. So al-amr, which is the positive command. Right? So this is the command, also known as the imperative. And the nahi is the negative command. Negative command, right? Or prohibition. Okay. We've already discussed before that there are certain prefixes that you can add to verbs to make them negative. Okay, so we have, for instance, we had la, and this is just a slight recap. La is used for the, generally used for the mudari', right, the present tense. It can be used for the past tense if there's two verbs being negated. So la saddaqa wa la salla. Right? He didn't pray, he didn't give charity, nor did he pray. Right? La dhahaba zaydun wa la waqafa. Right? He didn't leave, nor did he stay. Okay. Then you have ma, right, and that's generally used for past tense, right? Even though it can be used for present tense sometimes. Okay. Then you have lan, right, which is only for mudari'. Right? It gives the meaning of never, and then you have lam, okay, which is only for mudari', but it gives the past tense meaning. Okay. So now, as a prelude to what we're about to talk about today, and this is specifically a prelude to the nahi, to the negative command here, right? That la, there are multiple types of la, right? So there is la that is for an-nafyi with a fa. Okay, so nafyi means, right, something that is negative, right? Nafyi is negative. Nahyi is a prohibition. It's a negative command. Okay, so this la just means no, right, or didn't. Okay, whereas there is another type of la, and you can tell the difference by the context, which is la an-nahi, which is what we'll be talking about today, which is the la of prohibition, which means don't. Right? Don't do something. Okay, right. So today we'll be talking about the second type of la. Right. So there are other types of la. There's actually one more type of la. Actually, two more types of la. One is the la that you would negate an entire category when you say like la ilaha illallah. There's no God whatsoever except Allah. Right. So that's a type of la as well. But these are the two main ones. One is to make the sentence a negative sentence. The other one is to make a negative command or prohibition. Tamam. Okay. So with that being said, what we're going to talk about today is two things. That how do you construct right a command verb, either positive or negative. Okay, so that's our discussion today. Now, constructing the command verb, right, is similar to how we constructed the past tense and the present tense, that there is a certain template that we're going to follow. Right, so we mentioned that the past tense template, right, for verbs that have three letters is fa'ala, right? right? Or the equivalent to fa'ala, right? Fa'ula or fa'ila. Right? There's a few ways you can say it. Most important that it's the first letter has a fatha. Right? That's the active. Right? Right? He did. Okay. Then the present tense, and this is all form one, right? Like we mentioned, present tense is similar to this. Yaf'alu, even though it can be yaf'ulu or yaf'ilu. Some words are different. You can tell that in the dictionary. Right? So sometimes they write it like this, not to confuse you, but to show you that the middle letter can sometimes change, and that's not the letter that has the most importance, right? Whereas this fatha and this fatha indicate that it's active as opposed to passive. If it was passive, it would be fu'ila and yuf'alu, right? So you can see a difference. So these are the ones that we discussed so far with regards to form one, right? And these are templates that you can use. So if you're going to use a different word, you're going to use it on this template. So sajada yasjudu, right? Dakhala yadkhulu, sami'a yasma'u, fataha yaftahu. Right? All of those you apply to the template here. Now, if you want to make a negative, right, or sorry, I should say a prohibition or a negative command, right? Then or a positive command, then you need a new template. And that template depends on the type of form that you're using. Right? So we'll start with form one since we're already here. Right? Form one for the, let's say, al-amr, which is the positive command, right, is made from the mudari'. You're going to construct it starting with the template of the mudari', right, which is this. Right? So yaf'alu. So this is step one. Right, step one. Okay, you're going to start with your mudari'. However, we did slightly mention this before, that when you're doing a command, right, commands are generally in in second person. Right? You're commanding someone else to do. So you're saying, you sit down, you walk, you write, right? So whereas yaf'alu is third person. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the form one scale of mudari', but we're only going to use the second person components, right? So if we, right, what we can do is you can write them out, right? Second person would be taf'alu, right? Taf'alani, taf'aluna. That's masculine, right? And we can write the corresponding pronouns as well. So this would be anta, you one man. This would be antuma, you two men. Right? Antum, you three or more men. And then this would be taf'alina, which is anti, right? You one woman are doing, right? Because this is mudari', right? Anti as opposed to anta, right? Taf'alina, taf'alani again, but this time for feminine. Right? Antuma. And then last one is taf'alna. And we talked about this one. This is a feminine plural, second person, right? That last noon is fixed. It'll never change. Antunna. Okay. So these are the selection. These are the 6 second person uh, uh, part of the mudari' scale that are the second person, that are in the second person, right? As opposed to yaf'alu, yaf'alani, yaf'aluna, taf'alu, taf'ani, yaf'alna. Those are all third person. Then the next 6 are second person. Then the last 2, af'alu, naf'alu, are first person. So when you're commanding something, you're commanding someone else, right? So it's not going to be first person. And that person who you're commanding is generally, right, a person who you're speaking to. So it's second person in Arabic called al-mukhatab, right? The person you're addressing. We'll discuss third person commands later. Okay, so you're going to form your present your your positive command in form 1 from these 6. So what you do, what is the process? All right, we'll start with just one example, and then we'll apply it to the others. So the first one is taf'alu. You are doing. But I don't want to say you are doing. I want to say do. Okay? So first step, you start with your mudari'. Second step, you drop the first letter, right, which indicates to the pronoun what's within it. So that anta, right, the pronoun is represented by a ta in the beginning. So you remove that, right? So what are you left with? Like that, but you're missing something here. Okay, so you remove that ta and you replace it with a hamza. Okay. Now, with regards to the hamza, right, depending on what the third letter of the word is, right, you're going to change the vowel of the hamza. Okay, so if the in this case the ayn, if the middle letter is a fatha or a kasra, the hamza in the front gets a kasra. Right, so we're using fa'ala, yaf'alu, so the middle letter is a fatha. So I put a kasra, right, on the hamza. If I was using a word like, for instance, jalasa, it's the past tense, yajlisu, where the middle letter is a kasra, right? So I would be using the second person, which is tajlisu. Tajlisu. What I would do is I would take the ta and replace it with a hamza. Right? However, the hamza, the middle letter has a kasra here. So I'm going to put a kasra. Right? So you have ijlis. Okay, so if the middle letter is a kasra, the hamza is a kasra. If the middle letter is a fatha, the hamza is a kasra. The only one where it will change from a kasra is if the middle letter is a dhamma. Right, so for instance, the word to enter, dakhala yadkhulu, with a dhamma in the middle. So if we use the second person, it'll be it'll be tadkhulu. So the middle letter here has a dhamma. So when I replace the hamza, the ta with the hamza, right, the middle letter having a dhamma, then my hamza, right, will also be written with a dhamma, like that. Udkhul. Okay. So to recap, you're going to replace the first letter with a hamza. You're going to take out the ta, you're going to put a hamza in its place. Now the voweling of the hamza depends on the middle letter of the word, the ayn column. Right? So whatever letter is in the ayn column, you look at the vowel. If it's a fatha or a kasra, the hamza preceding gets a kasra. If it's a dhamma, and only when it's a dhamma does the hamza before it get a dhamma. So you say unsur, udkhul, ukhruj, but you wouldn't say ujlis, right? Or uftah. You would say iftah, ijlis, right? Because the middle letter is a kasra or a fatha. Right? So going back to what we're doing, right, with taf'alu, okay? So we've started with the regular mudari', second person, anta, right? We've taken out the hamza and replaced it. Right? We've taken out the ta and replaced it with a hamza, and we've put the kasra because the middle letter is a fatha. Last thing we have to do, which is the final step, right, is to make the final letter majzoom. And the reason why I said majzoom instead of a sakin is because only when the verb is singular, which would be this one, right, or only when the verb doesn't have extra letters on the end of it, like here you have the final letters, the lam, right, which is the root letter. Whereas here, all of these, the final letter here, all ends in a noon. Right, so with regards to the one that doesn't have anything on the end, you're going to see the sukun. Right, so taf'al becomes if'al. Right, whereas the rest of them, right, you'll see the equivalent to the majzoom, right? So the jazm is a sukun or its equivalent, right? Okay, so that's the singular taf'al. Now, if we apply the same thing to taf'alani, same steps to taf'alani, right, which is you two men, okay, and it also can be you two women, depending on the context. It's the same word in Arabic. Okay, so what we're going to do is step one, right? We're going to remove the ta, right? So that leaves us this, right? And the ta gets replaced with a hamza, okay? And then a hamza gets a kasra because the middle letter is a fatha. So fatha or kasra, hamza gets a kasra. Middle letter is a dhamma, hamza gets a dhamma. Right? So you have if'alani, right? And then last step is that the word becomes majzoom because all command words are majzoom, right? And by majzoom here, I cannot just put a sukun, right? Because essentially I have two sukuns there. Because la is lam with a fatha, alif with a sukun. Okay, so since I can't have two sukun, right, the noon falls off, right? Because the alif is a signifier of dual, and I need that. Whereas the noon it's similar to like the tanween of a noun, right? Which is you can do without. Right? So if'ala. So taf'alani becomes if'ala. If'ala. Right? Taf'aluna, sorry, becomes if'alu. Okay? So we already did the first one, right? If'al, right? This becomes if'ala. This becomes, if you follow the same steps, if'alu, right? Again, the noon falls off. If'alu. Same thing here. It becomes, taf'alina becomes if ali. The noon falls off. Then if'alani is same as the one previous, becomes if'ala. And then the final one, right? Since that final noon is fixed, the noon does not fall off. It is still considered majzoom. However, the noon cannot fall off because it's a third person. It's a feminine plural noon. Right? So your scale, instead of saying taf'alu, taf'alani, taf'aluna, taf'alina, taf'alani, taf'alna, right? If you want to make it a command, it becomes if'al, do, right? As it says in the Qur'an, if'al ma tu'mar, do as you were commanded. If'al, if'ala, right? In the Quran it says fadhhaba, right? Idhhaba, right? You two go. Bani Israel said to Musa and Harun that you both leave, right? And we're staying here, right? If idhhaba, so idhhaba, if'ala, if'alu, right? Is if'alu, right? Udkhulu, because the middle is a dhamma, it starts with a dhamma. Udkhulu al Jannah, right? And all of you enter Jannah, right? If'ali, right? Allah says to Maryam alayha salam, irka'i ma'ar raki'in, irka'i, make ruku', bow, right? But he's addressing one woman, irka'i, right? If'ala is the same thing, but dual for feminine, and then if'alna, right? Allah says, وَآتِينَ الزَّكَاةِ وَأَقِمْنَ الصَّلَاةِ, right? In the Quran, أَقِمْنَ الصَّلَاةِ. So that's the basics of form for making a positive command in form 1. That your command is going to be based on the second person, the 6 second person verbs in the mudari' scale. You're going to remove the first letter, the pronoun. You're going to place it with a hamza. The hamza's vowel is going to be according to the middle letter. The vowel of the hamza is going to be according to the middle letter. Right? If the middle letter is a fatha or a kasra, then the hamza is a kasra. If the middle letter is a dhamma, then the hamza is a dhamma. Right? And then that applies to all 6. The only one, so the first of the 6 will get a sukun on the end. Then the rest of them will have the equivalent, which is the dropping of the noon. except for the final one, which is fixed. Right? So if'al, if'ala, if'alu, if'ali, if'ala, if'alna. And that's the way. Right? If it was a word that's had a dhamma in the middle letter, it would be, for instance, udkhul, udkhula, udkhulu, udkhuli, udkhula, udkhulna. Right? So it would be the same thing except dhamma on the beginning. Tamam. Now to make a negative, right? To make a negative, right? We're going to have to, let's just move this for a second. Okay. Okay. Now to make a negative, oops. Yeah. There you go. Okay, in order to make the negative, you're going to use the same six, the taf'alu, taf'alani, taf'aluna, taf'alina, taf'alani, taf'alna, because you're addressing somebody still, right? So you're saying don't sit, la tajlis, right? You're still addressing the second person, right? However, the process is slightly different. So what is our process? That we're going to make the nahi for form 1 is that we're going to take the same 6 patterns, right? We'll take taf'al as an example, taf'alu as an example, and very easily we're just going to add the la of prohibition, right? The la to make a negative command, and we're going to make the final letter of our taf'alu majzoom, right? Taf'al, la taf'al, la taf'al. So nothing else is needed. La taf'al. Now, if you apply that to our chart here, we're going to have la taf'al, as we mentioned, and then because they're majzoom, right, the noons will fall off. La taf'ala, right? La taf'alu, right? La taf'ali was taf'alina, the noon fell off. La taf'ali, la taf'ala again. And then the last one is la taf'alna. Again, the noon, even though it's majzoom, that noon is fixed. It does not fall off. Right, so these are mentioned above, the first ones. Right, so if you were to do them together, it would be for the positive command, if'al, if'ala, if'alu, if'ali, if'ala, if'alna. If you're doing the negative command, it would be la taf'al, la taf'ala, la taf'alu, la taf'ali, la taf'ala, la taf'alna. Okay, and that applies to the same whether, regardless of what subcategory form 1 is. So if the middle letter, for instance, is a kasra, right? You would say la tajlis, la tajlisa, la tajlisu, la tajlisi, la tajlisa, la tajlisna. Right? Nothing really changed. Just keep in mind that the middle letter, right, varies according to the type of word, the word, even within form 1, and that's just form 1. Form 1 is like that. It doesn't have anything. The middle letter is not fixed. It can be changed to them. Right, so both of them are constructed from the mudari', right? The command, you remove the ta, replace it with a hamza, and make the word majzoom. Whereas the nahi, you just add la and make it majzoom as well. Now for form 2 to 10, right, and we haven't specifically gone through all the forms. Right, so for forms 2 to 10, the positive command, the amr, and the nahi, right, are slightly differ from the first person. Right, so the positive command, right, is made from the past tense. So made from past tense. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the past tense of the form 2 to 10. Right, so You have fa'ala. Right? Fa'ala is form 3. Right? Af'ala. And this is all available on the chart that we gave out. Right? Tafa'ala. Write that a bit clearer. Tafa'ala. Tafa'ala. Okay. Then it's right, in fa'ala. Ifta'ala. Right, if'alla. And then istaf'ala. Okay. So all of from form 2 to 10, all of the positive commands are made from the past tense. Tamam. So I'm just going to write them out. There's not really a set form, but they all follow the similar pattern. Right? So we'll write it out first and then we'll explain the pattern. Right? So fa'ala becomes fa'il. Fa'il. Right? Again, you see the last letter becoming majzoom, right? And then the second to last letter getting a kasra. So remember that, right? Form 3 becomes fa'il, right? Form 4, f il. So we see again, right? The second to last letter being a kasra. So for the first 3, you see a type of pattern forming, but form 5 and form 6 are slightly different. Okay, so this is 5 here. It's tafa'al. It's the same exact verb, except the last letter is majzoom. Right, so you can see a slight difference forming there. Same thing with tafa'al. Tafa'al. Right, and then it returns. So these are a type of exceptions. Right, and then it returns to the same principle that we mentioned just now, that the second to last letter gets a kasra. So in fa'il, right? If, sorry, let me write that a bit neater. Right? If ta'il, if alla, if you recall from last lesson, we discussed how to make a doubled letter majzoom. Here, so here we have a doubled letter. We use the example of yamuddu. Right, yamuddu in the previous lesson. Right, in order to make it majzoom, so we added, for instance, the particle of that makes majzoom. If you put a lam, you can either put lam yamudda with a fatha, or you can put lam yamdud. You can open up the tashdid. Right, same thing applies here. You can either say, let me just move this out of the way. Okay, so here you can either say, if Allah, which it looks exactly like the past tense. I mean like the present tense, past tense. Apologies. Right, or you can say if alil. You can open up the tashdid. Right, this is only allowed because of there's not many options when it comes to a doubled letter at the end. You can't make it a sukun, right? So apologies, you can't make it a sukun, so you have to. Right, you're allowed to make it a fatha. However, right, it suffices to say that this word, right, because it's intransitive, it'll never have an object, right? So therefore, it is highly unlikely that you'll use it in the command sense. And then the final one, right, follows the previous pattern. Istaf'il. Second to last letter gets a kasra. Right, so you can see that there's only a few exceptions. Right? We have an exception, right, on form 5 and form 6, and then we have a tough word here on form 9. But every other one, you can see the second last letter gets a kasra. second last letter gets a kasra. Tamam. Right? So istaf'il. Right? Allah says, wastaghfir. Right? And seek forgiveness. Now, just to note that with the exclusion of form 4, all of the hamzas that are here in the beginning of the words are all hamzatul wasl. I'll write that for you. Hamza to al wasl. Now, hamzatul wasl literally means the hamza of connection. Wasala means to connect. Right? The hamza of connection. So what it means is that, so let's say istaghfir. Right? The command in the Qur'an to seek forgiveness. Istaghfir. Okay. If you're reading this word by itself, right, then again you follow the same rule that you put, if the second to last letter, right, is a kasra, then you put a kasra in the first word. Right? But if you're reading from before this word and connecting to this word, right, like for instance, if I had the word thumma, right, then seek forgiveness, right, then you would just skip over the hamza because the hamza is meant to connect. You would just say thumma astaghfir, right? So we see in the Quran wastaghfir, right, li dhambik, right, wastaghfir, and seek forgiveness from your sin, right, or fastaghfir, right, then seek forgiveness. Right, so all of these hamzas, with the exclusion of form 4, because that hamza is it's called hamzatul qata' or hamzatul wasl, hamzatul asli. It's a fixed hamza, right? All the other ones, you would skip through the hamza to the first word that has a sukun. Tamam. Okay, so you can see the command for, apologies, the command for form 2 to 10, right, are all made from the past tense as opposed to form 1, which is made from the present tense. Yeah. Now, if we want to, let's take a look now at form 2 to 10 with regards to the negative command. Okay. Now, just like the positive command of form 1, the negative commands of all the forms, including from form 1 to form 10, are all made from the present tense. Right? So again, you're going to use the same 6, right? Taf'al, taf'alani, taf'aluna, taf'alina, taf'alani, taf'alna, right? Whatever form it is you're going to be using, whether it's form 2 to 10 or form 1 to 10, you're going to put Allah in the beginning and make the word majzoom. Okay, so what is the mudari' of form 2? Right? It is yufa'ilu, right? Form 3, yufa'ilu. Right? Form 4 is yuf'ilu. You can see a pattern that all of them have a dhamma on the front, and the second to last letter is a kasra. Right? Had it been a dhamma on the front and then the second to last letter a fatha, they would be passive. Right? They would be passive and not active. Form 5 and 6, again, they are special. Right? So it's the first letter stays a fatha, except that it becomes yatafa'alu. Right? If it was a dhamma, yutafa'alu, then it would be passive. Right? So and this applies to form 6 as well. Yatafa'alu. Right? Form, and then it goes back to the original. So yen fa'ilu. The first letter is now fatha. And these are things that just need memorization. And once you get them down, so yafta'ilu, right? Yaf'alu. Right? Again, because of the doubled letter, you won't see the kasra on the second to last letter. Actually, it's supposed to be yaf'alilu, right? There is a kasra, right? But because of the joining of the letters, right, you can't really see it. And then form 10 will be yastaf'ilu. Yastaf'ilu. Sorry, some of them are a bit out of line. Okay. So the nahi of form 1 to 10, all of them are just you're just taking a la, right? So we already did form 1, which is la taf'al, right? Or the dropping of the noon. So here it'll be the same. So la tufa'il would be the second person, kasra. I mean with a sukun at the end, right? La tufa'il, right? La tuf'il. So you see that there's not much being done. Now here, right? This would be la tatafa, la tatafa'al. Right? La tatafa'al. Right? La tanfa'il. Right? La tafta'il. La taf'alla or la taf'alil. You can open up the tashdid, or you can just use a fatha. Sorry. La taf'alla. And the last one will be la tastaf'il. La tastaf'il. Like la tastaghfir. Okay. So the prohibition seems to be a bit easier than the positive command because it's similar throughout all 10 forms, right? So you're going to just add a la, and then you're going to add a la to the second person form, the second person sigha of the mudari', and then you make the word majzoom, right? And remember that when the word doesn't have any additional letters on the end, like a waw noon or an alif noon, right? Then you're going to see the sukun, la tufa'il, right? La tufa'il. But if it's dual or plural, then the noon will fall off. So if we were to just take one example, like for instance, la tuf'il, form 4, la tuf'il would be, if you were to do all 6, it would be la tuf'il, la tuf'ila, la tuf'ilu, la tuf'ili, la tuf'ila, la tuf'ilna. Right? The noon, the final noon, remaining because it's fixed. Tamam. Right, so this is how the structure of the command is used. We will talk about in the future, inshallah ta'ala, regarding prohibitions and commands done with words that end in sikh letters, right? Or words that end in, or that start with sikh letters, that have sikh letters within them. Right? They have slight nuances, right? As we've seen already, that there's a lot of nuances around the sikh letters. Last thing we want to mention, and we're not going to go into too much detail, is the third person command, which is called al-amr. I'll write it here. Right? The third person command, right, which is called al-amr, right? Amr meaning command, lil ghaib, for the absentee. That's how they call the third person in Arabic. Al-amr lil ghaib. Al-amr lil ghaib. Right, so the command of the third person, which is ghaib, right, literally means the person who is absent. Right, so here, right, as opposed to the the normal command, which is in the second person, taf'alu, taf'alani, taf'aluna, taf'alina, taf'alani, taf'alna, you're going to be using those six, that second person part of the scale, which is the middle 6, and you're going to change the ta to a hamza, and that becomes the command. Right? But if you're making a command to the third person, you're going to be using the first 6. So yaf'alu, yaf'alani, yaf'aluna, taf'alu, taf'alani, yaf'alna. So those are the first 6. He, those 2 men, those 3 men, she, those 2 women, those 3 or more women. Right? And included in this, right, the same rules apply to the first person. So af'alu, naf'alu also have these same rules as well. So what you're going to be doing, and we'll write out the whole scale actually. If you just give me a moment. يفعل, يفعلان, يفعلون, تفعل, تفعلان, يفعلن. Right, that's the first feminine plural. Right, then تفعل, تفعلان. I'll just make it a little bit smaller so it fits on one page. تفعلون. This is the beginning of the second 6. تفعلين, تفعلان, تفعلن, the second feminine plural. Both of them, the noon is fixed. And then let's just scroll down a little bit. Right. أفعل, that's I, the first of the first persons. And then نفعل, which is we. Okay, so these first 6, right, are third person. The second 6, which I made them small because we're not going to be talking about those. Those are the second person. We've already discussed those. Right? And these final 2 are first person. Okay. Just clean that up a little bit. This is first. Okay. So the third person command is going to revolve around these sections, right? This is the second person command. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, right, to change the third person or the first person to a command type sentence, which again translates more as a suggestion, right? So let them say good or be quiet, or let them be silent, right? As we mentioned in the hadith in a previous class, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Right? So how it's made is that first you add what's called the lam of a lam. Al-lam is the proper name of the letter. Al-lamu lil amr. Right? The lam, which is for command. Right? We've discussed this a little bit before. This is another one of the prefixes that you can add to a mudari' to make it majzoom. Right? And the reason why it's majzoom here is because it's a command. All commands are majzoom. Right? So you're going to add this lam, right, to the following words. So if we just take that out. Oops. And we're going to put that down here. Okay, so you're going to add a lam to each of these. So instead of yaf'alu, it's li yaf'al. Okay, so the first word becomes majzoom, right, with a sukun, because you can see it, because there's no additional alif noon or waw noon at the end of this word. Right, so it's a default. Right, it's it's just the bare word itself. It doesn't have any additionals, right, showing the dual or the plural. So then you'll just see the sukun. Right? However, if it does have a dual or a plural, right, then again, instead of a sukun, you have the equivalent, which is the dropping of the noon. Right? So it becomes liyaf'al, liyaf'ala. I'm sorry. Liyaf'ala, liyaf'alu. Again, the hamza is there to show that wow, this wow, is not a root letter. Rather, it is a letter to show plural. And that's why you put the alif there. in case you were wondering. Here it's litaf'al. Again, because it doesn't have an alif noon or a waw noon on the end, so there's no additional letters, it can get a sukun. Right? Litaf'alani, becomes litaf'alani becomes litaf'ala again, like the other one, and then liyaf'alna again because this noon is fixed. It's mabani. It's fixed. Okay, so these are, right, he should do, or let him do, let those two men do, let those three men do, let her do, let those two women do, let those three or more women do. It's a suggestion of sorts. Right, again, so now, right, we're going to skip the next 6 because those are second person. Right, and then the final 2 become the same way. Right, so instead of af'alu, I'm going to put li af'al. And then li naf'al. Right, you can translate this as I should do, right, or or we should do, or let, yeah, because it's tough to say, to command yourself, so it has more of the meaning of should, right? Li af'al, I should do this. Okay, obviously we left out these 6 because they are commands, right? They are direct commands. They're not commands of third person or absentees. So if we wanted to, we could add what we've done already and make the full scale. Right? If'al, if'ala, right? If'alu, if'ali, right? If'ala, running out of space, and if'alna. So if we were to do the whole command chart, we would say liyaf'al, liyaf'ala, liyaf'alu, litaf'al, litaf'ala, liyaf'alna, if'al, if'ala, if'alu, if'ali, if'ala, if'alna, liyaf'al, linaf'al. So those are all the commands. The first 6 and the final 2 being for being third and first person. The middle 2 being the actual command itself, because it has the fullest meaning of telling someone to do something who is present in front of you. They are the second person commands. They are the defaults. Tamam. Now, with regards to the negation, the prohibition, this is an-nahi lil ghaib, right, for the third and first persons, right? Then essentially it's the exact same thing. It's the easier of the two. You add the la and you make the final word majzoom. La yaf'al. Okay? Right? La yaf'ala. La yaf'alu. So you can see the noon is missing. So that's a sign that it's majzoom. Right? La taf'al, la taf'ala, la yaf'alna. لا تفعل, لا تفعلا, لا تفعلوا, لا تفعلي, لا تفعلا, لا تفعلنا. Those are the second person. And لا أفعل, لا نفعل. I shouldn't do. Those are not as common. Those are not as common as the general second person commands. Tamam. Right. So if we just mention one hadith, right, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, men, so whoever, kana yu'minu, yu'minu, which is form 4, from amana, which means to believe, right? If it's used with the letter ba, so yu'minu billah wal yawmil akhir, right? And the last day, which is a descriptive phrase, right? Billahi wal yawmil akhiri, right? Then what? Fal yaqul, fal yaqul khayran aw liyasmut. Okay, so here we have 2 commands right? Second person or third person commands. فَلْيَقُلْ and لِيَصْمُتْ. Now here we have this fa in the beginning, right? فَلْيَقُلْ. That fa means then, right? Because it says, whoever believes in Allah on the last day, then let them speak good. So if you notice, the fa goes straight into the lam. You don't say فَلْيَقُلْ, فَلْيَقُلْ. You say فَلْيَقُلْ. It's easier on the tongue, right? So it just connects directly to the lam. That lam, if the fa was not there, would be liyaqul, liyaqul. As we mentioned, the lam lil amr, the lam that is used for a command, in this case, third person command, uh, generally is written with a kasra, right? And you can see that kasra, apologies, here, right? When there's no word prior to it, there's no word that's attaching to it, like fa, right? Before it actually is a sukoon, so it wouldn't attach anyway. So o liyasmut, right? If you put a fa before liyasmut, it would be fel yasmut, right? Okay, right. So the fa attaches to the lam, right? And words attached to the lam, unless, right? So you can say thumma yaqul, right? Thumma yaqul, right? Then let him say. Okay. Now, why is it liyaqul? Right? It was yaqulu, right? Which is where you get the word say. So yaqulu is the third person mudari', right? We're adding we said to add the lam, right? And make the last letter sukun. That's how you build it. It's how you build the third person command. Now we have a problem here. And we've discussed this problem before, where you have two sukuns in a row, and that is a no-no. You cannot do that, right? That is not permissible in the Arabic language. It's called ijtima'u sakinain, right? The combining or the gathering of two sukun, two sakins. In the case that happens, right, the sick letter is usually the first to fall off. So li yaqul becomes li yaqul, right? Li yaqul. Okay, so the waw dropped off. Everything else stays the same. Li yaqul. And then when I added the fa, right, uh, the lam left and became a sukun. Fal yaqul. Okay, right? فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا, then let them say good. Right? خَيْرًا, there is the object, right? أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, samata, yasmutu, right? Right? Just you can see the sukun there, right? There's nothing, right? That's exactly how we did it. لِيَفْعَلْ, لِيَصْمُت. Right? Obviously the middle letter, in this case, is al-dhamma. Tamam. Right? So you can see a lot of examples of these throughout the Qur'an and throughout the hadith. Right? The other hadith starts the same way. Whoever believes in Allah on the last day, فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ. It's a form 4 word. Right? It starts the same way, and then it says فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ. That whoever believes in Allah in the last day, then let them honor their guest, or let him honor his guest. ضَيْف is guest. ضَيْفَهُ is a possessive phrase, his guest. فَلْيُكْرِمْ is from form 4. Form 4 is akrama in the past tense. Now again, this hamza is fixed. It's not a hamzatul wasl, right? Yukrimu is the mudari'. Yukrimu, right? So in order to make this mudari' into a third person command, I put a lam in the front, yuk, right? And then the last letter becomes a sukun, yukrim, right? ضيفه. And then again, right, because of the fa, right, liyukrim became falyukrim. Right, the lam gave up its kasra, right, in order for a sukun. Oops. Right, liyukrim ضيفه. Tamam. Right, so that's the basics regarding the positive and negative commands. Right, so if we look back at the top of what we discussed, right, you have the positive command or the imperative, right, which doesn't have any prefix. Unless it's a third person command, then you would use the prefix li, right? Okay, and then the negative, right, the prefix is la, right, but the la here means don't. It's a la li nahi, la and nahi, right? Naha, the word naha, naha, yanha in Arabic, right? You can see it ends in a sikh letter, so instead of saying nahaya, nahaya yanhayu, right, it just says naha yanha, means to prohibit, right? So naha means he prohibited, right? Yanha is he is prohibiting. Okay, so this is la linnahi, right? Linnahi, and then this is la linnafi, right? Which just means don't. Right? He didn't do it. Right? He is not doing it. La yafalu. Then we explained how to create it. Right? For form one, the command is created from the present tense, the mudari', right? The pronoun of the second person, the ta of all of them, taf'alu, taf'alani, taf'alun, taf'alina, taf'alani, taf'alna. That ta is changed to a hamza. The hamza is giving the vowel according to the second to last letter, which is the ayn in this case. If the ayn is a fatha or a kasra, the hamza gets a kasra. If the ayn is a dhamma, then the hamza gets a dhamma, and then the final letter becomes majzoom, either with a sukun if there's no additional letters that show dual or plural, right? Or with the dropping of the noon if it is the other letters, keeping in mind that the sixth one, taf'alna, the noon does not drop off because it's a fixed noon because of the feminine plural. For forms 2 to 10, on the other hand, they are made from the past tense, as we mentioned here, right? In most cases, with the exception of form 5, 6, form 5 and 6, the second to last letter gets a kasra and the word becomes majzoom. Okay, for form 9, right, if Allah, because of the doubled letter, right, you have two choices. If Allah, just as is normal, but with the context that it's a command, or if alil, right, you can open up the tashdid and then you have the second to last letter would have a kasra, like normal. Uh, for the prohibition, on the other hand, from form 1 all the way to form 10, they're all the same. You add the la in the beginning, and you make the word majzoom either with the sukun if it doesn't have any additional letters, or by dropping the noon if it has the noon there. Right. So you can see la taf'al, la tufa'il, la tufa'il, la tuf'il, la tatafa'al, la tatafa'al, la tanfa'il, la tafta'il. Right? La taf'alla or la taf'alil. You can do both either way. And la tastaf'il. Okay. And then we discussed the third person, right? Where you will just add for the command, you will just add the lam with a kasra on it, and then make the words majzoom. So you're basing it off the third person mudari', the first 6, yaf'alu, yaf'alani, yaf'aluna, taf'alu, taf'alani, yaf'alna. You're adding a lam, liyaf'al, liyaf'ala, liyaf'alu, litaf'al, litaf'ala, liyaf'alna, noting that all the words become majzoom, either with a sukun if it doesn't have additional letters to the end of it, or if it does, like it has the alif noon or the waw noon on the end, then the noon drops off with the exclusion of the sixth one, which is the third person feminine plural, yaf'alna, hunna, right? That noon stays, right? And then the final first person, af'alu, naf'alu, same form, right? The same way, you add the lam with the kasra, li'af'al, and you make it sukun on the end. Tamam. And we gave some examples from the hadith. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhiri falyaqul khayran aw liyasmut. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then let him say good, right? Let him say the good, or let him be quiet, right? Or they should say good, right? And they let them say good, or they should be quiet. Uh, there's another famous example that whoever sees amongst you an evil, فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بيده. Then let them change it with his hand. فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه. And if he cannot, with his tongue. And if he cannot, with his heart. And that is the weakest of faith. Right? So فليغيره. It's form 2. Right? Right? ليغير. I didn't write it. I didn't write form 2. Right? ليغير. فليغير. The fa comes in, the lam loses its kasra and becomes sukun, just because it's easier to say it that way. That's how the Arabs said it. So we'll pause here for today, inshallah ta'ala. You have one extra week to work on the take-home work that we did last week, which was to practice the form 1, past tense and present tense, with words that are made up by sound letters, right? Meaning words that don't have 6 letters in them. So next week, inshallah ta'ala, we will be going over that. And it's good to add to your repertoire practice of the command, right? Of the commands. And you have the scales here. And we'll share this document with those who are following along. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq and to bless us with knowledge of His Qur'an and knowledge of the language of the Qur'an. وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.